Here he is.
All right. Now, thank you all for being here this morning. I didn't set my clock last night. Reset it. I did this morning.
Thank
You know-
God. I need to do the talk too.
Usually, am I on? Is this okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Usually, I talk on the second Sunday of each month, but next month, I'm not going to be able to do that. And by the way, when Stella puts this on YouTube, she'll be putting in crying and screaming and everybody saying, "Oh no, Bob! But as many of you know, our son Benjamin is studying in England, and we're going to go there. So we won't be here for the first couple of weeks. It takes a lot of preparation and stuff, though, to go there. You know, you try to do everything you can to prepare. I've even been practicing, you know, I'm going to drive part of the time. It's amazing how upsetting it is for people when you practice driving on the other side. Of course, that's not what I'm talking about here today. I'm talking about the way we interpret the Bible. People interpret it in very funny ways sometimes. I was reading a book, The Underground Church, and it gave this minister talked about, he became a minister at this new church. It was a very rural church with very uneducated people in it. And when he got there the first day, I don't know the type of church it was, but they gave out the sacrament, the bread, if you will, by bringing it down the aisle, and they would give it to each person. And he's a new minister, he's sitting in the front row, and he hears all this popping and snapping, and he looks back and they're breaking up the bread to give it to people. And he thinks, wow, somebody certainly overcooked the bread this morning. And the next day it was the same way, and the next Sunday the same. And so finally he got the group together. He says, you're going to have to do something about your baker, because obviously he's burning the bread every day. And they looked at him and said, well, you know, this is what our last minister told us to do. Now, this is a true story. He said, our last minister said that we must follow the actual teachings of Jesus. And Jesus didn't teach that we should bend bread or tear bread. We should break bread with others. And so we have to bake the bread to the extent that we can break it. Now, many of the interpretations of the Bible are funny, but others are horrendous. And the way people have interpreted the Bible has resulted in millions of people getting tortured and killed and living their lives in guilt. And I mean, one of the horrendous ways people interpreted the Bible is the concept of forgiveness. Because you see, the concept of forgiveness, as interpreted by many in the Bible, is that Adam and Eve ate from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, as you all know, which was against the commandments of God. And now if we do something wrong and we sin, it's our punishment. But with Adam and Eve, this was the original sin, and therefore the guilt is carried on to every human being. And so every one of us, every person would be born already with a stain of mortal sin. And you would suffer the most horrendous punishment possible unless God forgives you. That's the only thing that can save you from this horrendous punishment of guilt that each person is born with. Now, I know many of you say, well, but we've gone way beyond that, certainly. I mean, we don't believe in original sin. But I'll tell you what, intellectually we don't. But our society was based on this. Our very society was designed from this concept. So be truthful with yourself say, how many of you have felt you were just at times undeserving of love? Just as you were growing up, you were unworthy of being praised. That you were just inherently incapable of being a good person. Were any of your lives like that when you were children? Because we're taught that. And sometimes not directly, sometimes subtly, we're taught that human beings are inherently flawed. And so, of course, your life is going to be one where you were born impure. You were born a flawed human being. Now, how different would our lives have been if every day of our lives as we were growing up, we were taught that we were incapable of being anything but part of divine spirit? What a difference that would make. And so this concept of this absolute need for forgiveness is taught to us as we go along. But maybe we've gone beyond that. Maybe we have. But if we don't have original sin, how about when we do things now? I mean, surely we would say if we do wrong things now, then we're judged as wrong and we need forgiveness from God. But we don't teach that, do we? We teach that God does not judge. We teach that there are principles of how the universe runs. I mean, if you jump off a tall building, you fall. That's not a judgment. It's a principle of life. He who lives by the sword dies by the sword. That the existence is circular, that what you give will come back to you. But these aren't judgments. These are principles, they're laws of how things work. We teach that God has not drawn a line and said, this side is good and this side is evil. These things are good and these things are evil. But has God messed up here? I mean, surely there should be judgments. I mean, we're all very concerned about our lives and the way we live. I mean, we think that there should be fairness. We think there should be right and wrong in our lives. We want things to go well. I mean, if you lose a friend, aren't you upset? If you lose $1,000, heck, if you lose out on the last donut, I mean, aren't you upset? I mean, we get upset over what happens with people in soap operas and movies and books, whether they're real or not. But God doesn't. Divine Spirit is not upset by these things. Divine Spirit does not judge any of that right or wrong because it's looking at the cosmic level. Divine Spirit, God, does not judge, and that can drive us absolutely crazy, or it can lift us up to new heights. And many people have not been able to cope with that. And so they develop a God that judges original sin. Or they deny there can be a God at all because people do bad things and they don't see them punished, and therefore there can be no God. And let's face it, we have our choice every day. We have our choice of what to do because we can put ourselves above Divine Spirit. We have the freedom every day of our lives to judge those around us. We are very, very capable of being able to judge each other on whether we're right or wrong. Now, I'm not saying Don't take a murderer and lock them up to protect society. But do you have to put your moral judgment on it? We have the choice. And if we choose to judge others, then we have a power again, a power that God does not take, because we can forgive them. We can say, you are guilty, but I forgive you. And let me tell you, if you make those judgments on people, and we all have, if you make those judgments on people, it's certainly best to forgive them. To say, I forgive you of that guilt. But there is another way to live. There is a way where we don't make those judgments. And let me tell you that others say, forgive and forget. But I say, forget and forgive. And I'll tell you the difference. Forget, the word forget, means to unget. In other words, you got, you unget. It means to let go out of your mind. And what is it that you let go out of your mind? It's judgment. You forget to judge. And if you forget to judge, if you release it, then I can tell you, you can do the true forgiveness. Because true forgiveness is not judging guilt and then magnificently saying, I forgive you. I release you of that guilt. Because let's look at what forgive means. Forgive means to give without restraint, without condition. We've heard that before, haven't we? To give our love unconditionally. So believe me, I understand you are powerful. Even though the greatest being, the greatest beingness of the universe, divine spirit, God, does not judge, you can. Even though not judging, God does not forgive, you can forgive the guilt of others. But you can also choose every single day, every single hour to forget, to release judgment, and go into true forgiveness, giving unrestrained, unconditional love, and we can live constantly in forgiveness and live constantly as the light of God. Thank you.